Broadcasting live from the IRSMedic studios, it's Parental Advisory. Well, hello, and welcome to Parental Advisory. We have a very special in-studio guest today. We're giddy. It's attorney Robert V. Hanson. What's the V for?
Vincent.
Vincent, excellent. Robert is an offshore tax and FBAR attorney at IRSMedic, and he's joining us today as we talk about the philosophy of tax law professors, which we shortened from our original idea.
Which was
how tax professors inadvertently brainwash lawyers into thinking the tax code is a good thing.
Ooh, yes.
That was a bit lengthy, so we
Do you agree
up.
with that editorialization of, would you agree with that?
Yeah, more or less, yeah.
More or less? All right.
Score.
Yeah, all right. All right, let's get some more points on the board here. Robert Hanson is quite a talent. I personally recruited him to work here almost for 2 years, and that's a lie. Actually, I didn't recruit him.
Not at all.
I didn't at all. I actually didn't even, I ignored him pretty much for like 2 months.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, then there was I think tax day 2014, April 15th, we had a little wine or something upstairs in celebration. And then we started talking about music, and I was like, this guy's really funny. He's really funny. I
You
like
just
him.
needed a drink to loosen you up.
Just a drink, I guess so. I think that's my memory. Am I?
That's probably close enough.
Probably,
You
right.
know.
Who really
I mean,
knows?
we were having wine, so, but talking about music, talking about how I had gotten pulled over, and, the cop at some point had given me a little slip of paper as
You
they were
weren't
towing
here.
my car
You weren't
away.
here at the office. You were, wait. Oh, that time. Right.
That's what it was. It was, I had gotten pulled over, and they were towing my car away, and the very nice police officer also handed me a little slip that says, by the way, don't forget to buckle up. And I went, now is a good time to give me this? Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Lots of humiliations in life.
Lots of humiliations in life.
So I want to talk about law school now.
That's something that you and I have in common.
That's something that we did not go to the same law school.
No, we did not.
And we did not go at the same time. We went probably 10 years apart.
Roughly.
About that, right. I went to the Quinnipiac University of Law.
Is that how you pronounce it?
I think, yeah, not the Quinnipiac or Quinnipiac, right. They do a great job polling and getting the name out there. And then I love when I see the name is spelled all the time too.
Right.
But we have that going for us. UConn, not a lot of people hear about them. I guess they have some sports teams or something like that, maybe.
Some mac and cheese controversies.
Oh, yeah, the jalapeno. That was the undergrad. We're not really going to dump that on the law school, but I think, you know what, we're just going to do it. We're just going to create the myth. So law school, for me, guess how much tax I studied in law school?
I'm going to say 0.
No, that's not true.
Oh.
Quinnipiac makes you take federal income tax. If they force it upon you. And I fought that tooth and nail, which means signing up for the class. Basically, it says, why do they make us take this? Why? I want to take real law. That's what I thought. I'm like, I want to take real law, not tax law, because I wanted to be a real attorney and, fighting civil rights for truth and justice and going to the Supreme Court and saying, no, Your Honor, you're out of order. That's what I was looking to do. And I don't see how tax law was going to do that for me. So I took the one mandatory class, and I took it with my dad. We took it at night with Professor Mary Ferrari, and my dad helped me get an A. And by helping, there's no way I would have without him. He cheerleaded me through. No, the tax code is a good thing.
Right.
Let's look at the public policy behind this. He was really one of those saying, no, don't turn your stomach. It's not that vomit inducing. He was one to say, don't you appreciate the elegance and beauty of the tax code? Let's go through and run through this entire example of how you would claim a credit. And we would do credits by hand, tax returns by hand. And it was just really, really difficult and horrible. And I was so glad when it was over. I got my A, and Professor Ferrari hooded my dad. And then the other tax professor, Tony Robinson, she hooded me when we graduated law school together. And you were there.
Oh, wow.
Remember that?
Yep.
Yep. That's the two tax professors at Quinnipiac hooded my dad and I.
That's awesome.
And he went on to do more tax because
He was good at it.
he was one of
enjoyed it.
those who enjoyed it. Now, did you take more tax classes than I did, Robert Hanson?
More than your one, yes, I took a lot. I was close to about 40 credit hours worth of tax classes.
So you went to college or to law school with the intention of studying tax law?
What UConn does is probably similar to Quinnipiac, right? I'm close enough.
Yep.
The very first year, you are made to take a stat reg course, a course focused on statutes and regulations, whereas all the other courses you take your first year, your contracts, your property, your criminal law, those are all common law based classes. So you'll be just reading a lot of court cases and discussing the different holdings in the cases, but you're not talking about the Internal Revenue Code. One of the courses that they offered for this stat reg course was federal taxation. So I took that my first year, and I was hooked. People ask me sometimes, when did you know you wanted to do tax? And I actually don't have a good answer for that. I took that class, I liked it, and then at some point I was like, oh yeah, I think I'll do that.
Wow.
I think I'll do that. And then fortunately for me, UConn had a lot more tax classes to offer. So corporate tax, partnership tax, international, a few others. Took the clinic.
We had a lot of tax classes.
You did? Okay.
At Quinnipiac. I just chose not to take them. Okay. All right. But they were there.
All right.
They were totally there. Michelle Wynn took them. Partnership, nonprofit. She took them all. So don't be dumping. I mean, I just thought I heard something in your tone.
No.
Okay. There was nothing there.
No, I don't think that.
Now, I see that Robert has the Cali Excellence, is that correct? Cali Excellence Award for International Tax Policy?
I do.
Do you have any awards like that, Anthony?
No, I do not. Robert is one of the most intriguing people to speak with about tax policy, and it is difficult for Robert to get any work done when I wander down the hall and into his office and sit down with my coffee and just sort of pick his brain. And that's where this topic today came from. Was just that I noticed an article written by a tax professor wondering why tax professors hadn't chimed in to anything on the Affordable Health Care Act, why there wasn't a bundle of opinion pieces written, and I came up with an article. I sent it to Robert to review, and basically Robert says you're entirely wrong.
No kidding.
And
nicely,
right? I mean, it was really. He made it seem like I came to the conclusion on my own, and you just gotta love that. I mean, that is a real attorney right there.
Yes, definitely.
And so that's sort of what led to today's discussion about sort of how tax professors work, how they think about things, how they develop, and how they influence the tax professional legal place, and how there's and I think that's one of the things that most impresses me about Robert is that a lot of those biases inherent with the younger attorneys, he sees through that. He sees more towards the truth, and a lot of the nonsense I might have believed when I was younger, he doesn't. So he has a wisdom that exceeds his years.
Wow. I think he wants you to stick around, Robert.
Yeah, I think it's very glowing.
And I hope that, do you feel better about your little tone before now? I hope you're feeling guilty.
Very slightly.
Right. Okay, well, I thought you said there was no tone. So which answer was it? That's attorneying right there.
There you go.
There you go. That's how you do it.
All right. Well, what I think I want to know is, how does someone become a tax law professor? I mean, not to sound jaded, but I was a little surprised somebody would actually be interested in being a tax lawyer. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
But so how and why would someone want to become a tax law professor? We'll talk about that right after this break. We've got a special podcast happening today here on Parental Advisory. Tune in live at 11:30 when we welcome guest Bill Loftus of LLBH Private Wealth Management. We're going to find out if you can actually opt out of the tax system. Don't think it's possible? You may be surprised. Also, be sure to visit our Facebook page to follow us and submit story ideas. And thanks to our sponsor, IRSMedic, real tax attorneys for tough tax problems. Visit IRSMedic.com for the latest news on the disaster that is the U.S. tax code. Welcome back to Parental Advisory. We are joined today by attorney Robert V. Hanson, talking about the philosophy of tax law professors. And what I'd like to know is, how does someone become a tax law professor? What would draw them into that sort of field? Is there benefits?
I would say, well, first thing, there was a little bit I wanted to a difference people had in reaction when I told people I was going to go into tax law. Mm-hmm. I was practicing law for 3 years, and I was also a little bit of an older student when I finished than Robert. So people I was hanging out with were 30, 40, 50 years old. Mm-hmm. Everybody was, hey, awesome. And Robert, what you told people you were going to get into tax law, what was the reaction there?
It's always two stories. One story I always like to tell is that my girlfriend would say to people, "Oh, my boyfriend's in law school." Everyone would go, "Fantastic, wonderful, wow, good for him. What kind of law does he want to do?" And then, as she said the word tax, before the would at the end of the word, their faces filled with admiration and just it would melt away into just looks of horror and like, "Oh my God, tax?
Sorry,
I'm sorry to hear that." And I'm like, well, I like it. So the people I talk, even law students at the time, like, ooh, tax, okay, that's something. You know, everyone's in law school, everyone's busy, everyone's doing work, learning what they're learning, but this tax is tough. So for me, it was just like, everyone's like, oh my God, why? Why would you do that to yourself? I was like, well, it's interesting to me. I like it. And
what was the age group, though, of a lot of the people that you were telling it to?
Oh, my age. They were
right.
in their 20s at the time.
Right. So the people I was telling to were probably making a little bit more money. So that's when, because I was doing general practice stuff, and no one was really too impressed with that. But when you said tax, all of a sudden you just became the most interesting person in the room. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, kind of walked up to you, and it sort of gave you a membership in a club that, you could see, like, you step in the room, they know it, and you could see guys they're working their way around to you.
So at the party, you were the guy, and they'd be like, "So Anthony, I've got this 401k." It's like the doctor, like, "Hey, I've got this weird rash. Can you check it out?"
Yeah, that was definitely better than, talking about dog cases, dog litigation, and other things. So it was really, it's like, it's nice to feel important. I enjoyed it. If I was a doctor, I wouldn't mind it. I really wouldn't mind it. I like feeling useful, and then I have something to do with my hands too. I can gesture instead of just standing at a party. Did you find yourself more popular at parties?
No. No. And as unpopular as I am at parties, being taxed makes you even less popular. At my age group, you're a little older than I am, so hopefully once I reach your august age,
yes.
the those looks of horror will return to looks of admiration.
Your contemporary.
It'll come full circle.
Will have your esteem, yes, and then you make sure. Where were you 10 years ago? That's right. So, Claudine, to answer your initial question, or your third question, the tax professors, or why would someone want to be a law professor?
Yeah, is there a benefit over being a different kind of professor?
Well, I would say a law school professor is the sweetest job in the world. If I had any chance of getting one back when I graduated in 2002, I would have definitely applied.
No kidding.
Oh my God, it is the best job in the world. I don't know. Maybe being a federal court judge, court judge is better, but the workload there is a little bit more intense, and people probably are going to yell at you more. But a law school professor, it's okay. So you have a limited amount of time you're actually doing things. You get paid to write papers, and you also have a whole army of research assistants to do all your dirty typo and writing research crap. And the school will pay them. You don't pay them. You're doing research, and you just, basically hang out with people who are dying to be your friend because you're going to give them a recommendation. Everyone is kissing your ass amazingly well. You're paid awesome. You're paid a lot.
Approximately?
I heard ours were well over 200.
What?
300.
There were
400.
From what my limited knowledge of it, yes, some of the big ones from UConn were making over 200. Most were six figures. From my understanding.
All right. Well, in Quinnipiac, that was in 2002. Those numbers. So I have no idea what they are now. And I mean, the demand, to get a job at a law school, it is just so competitive to get that. And you could be the number one student at Quinnipiac. Right? I could be the number one student graduating at Quinnipiac with recommendations for all the professors. I wouldn't get hired at Quinnipiac.
Really?
They would say no. I would say, well, why not? Well, because you graduated from Quinnipiac. In order to get a law school, generally the rules is, and there's a few exceptions. Generally, in order to get a law school professorship, you have to graduate from Brand A, and Brand A is Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Stanford, UCLA.
You're really looking at the majority of law schools. I think Harvard, Yale, your kind of top 10, top 14 schools. That's where the bulk of your law professors at almost every tier of law school come from.
And the reason why is because of U.S. News and World Reports, because they, everyone reads them all the time. They are just an incredibly popular, influential periodical.
Yes.
So clearly what they would say on what a law school should and shouldn't be should be most important to people.
Yeah.
And I do think, oh, yes, the sarcasm meter has been broken here. If you could reset that, Chen, thanks. So if you want, now I could become a professor. What I would have to do is I would have to get an LLM, a Master's of Law, which is basically doing another year of law school. And I probably could get into Yale. Just sort of based on my experience and maybe a few people I happen to know. And if I do that for a year, now I have my Yale LLM. Now I don't upset the stats if a law school hires me. They could still say, Ivy League.
Oh, okay.
But I don't really want to do that anymore. I don't think I want to go to school anymore, and I don't really want to be. I'm having too much fun doing this anyway. Right. So, but at the time, before I had my entire practice, I mean, would you say, did you want to be? I mean, if it was an option for you, would you have done it?
I did technically. When I was right after I graduated, I had the fortune of being hired as adjunct faculty for the UConn Low-Income Taxpayer Clinic. My official title was adjunct faculty. I was instructor. I was working with the other students. So it was great. It was fantastic. I got to work with kids, law students. I got to work with clients, helping them out, continuing that work. It was very nice. It was very nice. It lasted a year. And I'll take that for the time being. Would I want to take that and go to the next level? Yeah, I would if I could.
Yeah.
But getting an LLM, I want to work for a while and learn this way. And doing more academic work I'm sure has its merits. But for me, getting real world experience is a little more valuable for me right now.
Sounds like he's settled.
Good. Yes.
What do you?
Yes.
I can't be a professor, so I may as well go.
Did he settle with me, or he's settled with me?
All right. So now we know there's benefits to being a tax law professor.
Or any law professor, and it's really competitive. I mean, that's I think something to understand because of hiring. You got to impress various levels of hiring committees.
Yep.
And there's just. The boom is over. The boom is over where, the big hiring boom of the, in the 80s, there weren't a lot of attorneys. In the 90s, that's when they started coming. And so there was more jobs than there were, they had to fill them.
Yep.
And now it's consolidating.
All right. So now you're hired as a tax law professor. What's the switch? How are they inadvertently brainwashing lawyers into thinking the tax code is a good thing?
Well, I would say it goes back to why someone would choose to be a tax law professor over a regular, like any other law professor. why would someone become a tax law professor as opposed to, say, teaching constitutional law, as opposed to teaching torts, all the first year common law stuff, which is pretty fun to teach. I mean, I would say because there you're able to really bust stones with the Socratic method. You know, you do the Mr. Hanson, what would be the question here?
I think the issue is whether or not they had
Mr.
consideration.
Hanson, that's enough. Did you read the material?
Yeah, no.
Okay, that's enough for the day then. So you could really have a great time doing that. And there's a lot of competition, and it's the sexy stuff. It's the stuff that's the civil rights stuff. It's the truth, justice, right? And exactly the same thing that I wanted to be. Why I was turned off to tax law when I was in law school is I wanted to be a real, air quote, attorney. And that I didn't look, I saw, looking at regulations, this is like, that's all made up stuff. That's not real law. That's just, that's for people who couldn't hack, being a real attorney, and they had to go do that. And then I guess the irony is when I was out in practice and realized that there was no money in real law. There was no person who was coming in with a huge retainer to bring their civil rights case. In your criminal appeals, I had a couple of private ones, but most of them were public defender, which I was happy to get. There wasn't a lot of legal work that the real law was preparing you for. And that's when I realized, and that's when I made my move into tax law, because my dad and I it's 2004, 2005, when we were sort of figuring out what we were doing. We wanted to focus on, our questions were to each other, is like, well, we got to think of something here, because we can't be, the jackass of all trades. We got to focus on something, and then pitched the tax law. And then the question was, well, who do we know who practices tax law? And we couldn't think of anybody. So we said, well, we could be those guys. And that's sort of how we came up with it, because the turf was open and there wasn't the competition. And the people needed it. That's why I got into tax law. And then I think this is where my question for you, Robert, is for a tax law professor. Do you think it's easier to get a job as a tax law professor or a law professor?
I probably as a tax law professor, because you have a specialty. Tax is an area of law that a lot of firms have maybe a small practice of. They'll maybe have one or two in their overall. And it is an area of law that there are courses to teach in. And it is an important area to learn about. And if you can go in with that specialty and say, I am the expert in this, I have my Harvard Law degree and I have my LLM from New York University, I know taxes. And you can go in and be that authoritative figure and come in and teach your federal tax and then your corporate tax. And then you can get to teach your niche where you got most of your work done, maybe if you were a practicing attorney ahead of time, or where you focused your LLM in. You can go and say, I'll teach your first year federal tax, I'll teach your corporate tax, and then I want to do this little particular area. We'll do land use regulation and taxation or something along that line. And you can command, I think a job pretty, I don't want to say easily, but pretty easily, if you can show that you have this ability, you have the skill, and you have the credential.
Right, and I think it's the whole idea here is that you're claiming a turf that nobody else wants. And that's the same, I think. My dad and I claimed a turf. There was no competition. If we were doing personal injury, you couldn't walk you cannot walk 30 feet without hitting another personal injury law firm. But tax, then you would hear, there's a guy in New Haven, and there's a guy in Bridgeport, there's another guy in Fairfield, and that's sort of how spread out it is. So by claiming that tax turf, because attorneys naturally hate tax, the things that make someone want to become an attorney, sort of the argumentative, maybe boldness, maybe the big idea, all those things that make someone want to become an attorney are the very same things that would not make a good tax practitioner. So the tax attorneys are really the oddest combination of two totally different skill sets. And that's why really good ones are hard to find, because it's a really rare thing. And so when you know that you can do both of those things, that you can sit down with a whole bulk of code and not get distracted and sit down with it and see what does it really mean and not be intimidated by it. Because our best at the firm, our number one profession we've represented is other attorneys.
Yep. Because
they think that they don't like it. So they're just going to sort of ignore it. That's not real law, right? No. Right? They're still like, it's not going to happen.
And you know what, too, if you're a tax law professor, what we've learned here is that tax law is so convoluted. Nobody's going to come to the professor and go, you've got your facts screwed up. You're not teaching this class correctly. They've got free reign of...
No one's ever going to really criticize you on anything.
Yeah.
Pretty much what you say is going to be okay. And I would say, so Robert, the person who is into civil rights, the person who's into, I guess the real law, the Bill of Rights, that's not really the person who's going to get into tax law, right?
I mean, in a way, no, not really. I mean, there's very little in tax law that you can kind of get like kind of big Supreme Court cases and kind of, do like real like, this is unfair, or, the state of New York is levying this tax on me. It's going to be much more like going through the regulations, going through, does this merger and acquisition fall under one of the definitions of Section 351? And that's for a young, idealistic law student, that's not going to that's not going to grab them initially. They're going to want that big civil rights issue. They're going to want that big Supreme Court case that they can latch on to or fight. They can either hate it, they can either love it, they defend it, want to tweak it, whatever happens to be. The regulations don't lend themselves to excitement. Yes.
You know the irony, though? I think if you think about it, you guys are probably helping and touching more people's lives in a positive way than if you had gone with...
No question about it. No, that's why.
So.
That's why this was not this. My career path is not what I imagined, but I am so happy that it worked out this way, because the amount of people that I'm able to help on a daily basis far outstrips what I would have done if I was doing so-called real law. And when I was doing criminal law, well, guess what you're hanging out with all day long? I mean. They all kind of have records, right? They all kind of have records. So, okay, you got this guy off because of this, but guess what he did tomorrow? The next day. Have you helped anything really? You've done something, but in this case, we're dealing with people who have their entire lives and fortunes at stake. Something really huge to them, and these are good people. These are good, hard-working people who are no dummies. And if you help them, you're actually helping them, and you're helping the family behind them. Everything, you're lifting everybody. So it's just not like this, hey, I got you off today so you can go to prison tomorrow for something else that you didn't do, right? So that's where I'm just so fortunate that I sort of, found, my dad and I had that conversation so many years ago where we said, well, no one else is doing it. And I think we're starting to get to the point of where we're answering the question of how the law school professors sort of brainwashed the legal profession into thinking the tax code is a good thing, because the person who's looking at things from a constitutional level about due process, about specific powers granted to the federal government, about how the federal government gets its powers, is not the person who's going into tax law. You're going into tax law because there's a need for it, and there's a certain flavor of person who can do it. You're not going in there because you're big, bold, and brash. You're not. And I think the thing is that I kind of was more of a brash person. Okay. And I found myself in tax. And so that's why I sort of look at things from, and if, where I always come from, look, this thing's so friggin' unconstitutional, it will make you vomit. That's my political stance on it, because that's sort of how I approached it. I wanted to be that big, bold civil rights attorney, and then I ended up being a tax attorney. So to me, it's so plainly unconstitutional through and through. But if you try to have that conversation, if I had to try to have that conversation with some of my tax law professor friends, I really can't. they're just not gonna hear that. And why do you think that's so, Robert?
Well, I think part of the reason for that is that the person that they were talking about a minute ago, the person who becomes a tax professor is the person who's kind of dedicated themselves as professionally, career-wise, education-wise, academically, in doing tax. And you're going to do your research in your one little particular area, and you're going to think that particular area is really important. We need this particular law. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. That's unimportant for right now. But you're going to be focused on one little area. We need this law for this reason. The other laws, maybe not my area of expertise. So you kind of give it a pass. Maybe you think it's generally a good idea, but you're not going to put the time and effort into thinking about it critically that you do in your particular area, in which point you've decided, I need this type of depreciation, I need this type of rule for mergers and acquisitions, I need this type of
a like-kind exchange is
like-kind exchange.
1031 is the most important law, tax code out there. Every other tax law is I guess they're fine. They're fine
Right.
enough, but the thing that keeps everything together, the thing that keeps helter-skelter from happening is 1031. And if you get rid of that, oh man, you're going to have problems. And I am the number one expert on
Right.
1031 like-kind exchanges.
Right.
And I said, when I take that code out and I look at that, it's like that is that piece of the
keystone.
combine. That is I think the essential gear to the entire combine. And I take that out and I polish that up and I put it back in. I said, this. Without this, the whole thing can't run. And then you put it back. Now, who's the person looking at the whole combine to see what it does?
You.
IRSMedic.com. Looking at the entire. What's the end? What's our tagline? The unholy.
The disaster?
The disaster that is the U.S. tax code. There it is. You're right. Very good. Do you think we explained it?
I think.
I think so.
Provided some insight so someone listening can say, okay, I think I
Yes.
understand a little bit better now.
I would hope so. That because tax professors are so focused on each individual piece, nobody's seeing the whole.
Oh, that's a perfect sum up.
Hey,
there we go.
right, which is
Success.
perfect.
Well, Robert, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you
me.
very much.
Yeah, and stay tuned, actually. Don't go too far away because at 11:30, we are welcoming another guest. Into,
Yes.
He won't be live in studio, but we will be talking with Bill Loftus of LLBH Private Wealth Management about some... I'm going to keep this... I hate to sound surprised all the time, but some really interesting tax stuff.
It's really interesting. It's something, and a lot of the international tax. I might have been lying a little bit in sort of my build up to what this tax shelter is, and my sort of knowledge of it. Because I said, well, a lot of foreign stuff doesn't work. Well, I know basically because of the person next to me, Robert, and I really have had some fantastic conversations about using trying to go offshore. And I think that our basic summation is, for a lot of work, you can experience a moderate tax savings. But what we're going to talk about at 11:30 is really opting out of the federal income tax, and it actually works.
Wow. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today on Parental Advisory. Thanks for joining Parental Advisory, hosted by Anthony Parent, produced by Claudine Gindel, that's me, engineered by Chris Chen. For more podcasts, visit our website at parentaladvisoryshow.com and like us on Facebook to submit story ideas. We'd like to thank our sponsors, IRSMedic.com, the law offices of Parent, and Wynn, LLP, real tax attorneys for tough tax problems.